zone left corner. Touchdown!
Give the DJ Dozer 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Goodbye, he is gone!
Touchdown, Michigan! Hoist off the Heisman!
And listen to this joint go wild.
Here's Tom Osborne, whose teams had lost 5 straight games in the Orange Bowl, 7 bowl games overall, and the sense was, here's a nice guy who can't finish first.
The perception that even though Nebraska was always winning 9 and 10 games, it wasn't winning the big one.
Coach Osborne, I'm sure he really felt it because he came into the program in '72 after winning 2 championships in a row, and then they said he couldn't win the big one.
As a kid watching the Cornhuskers play, and even as a recruit, that was part of the thing that was overhanging this whole program, is that we hadn't won a championship under Tom Osborne.
I remember one national writer called him bowl impaired. Nebraska was a bowl impaired program.
When you win 9 games, you win 10 games, you get to the championship game, but you don't win it. And that's the perception. Hey, it wasn't Tom's perception, but that's the way the fans looked at it.
There's always people who tend to talk about what you haven't done. And so the thing that was missing was a national championship. There were some who said, well, Nebraska can't win the big one, Tom Osborne can't win the big one.
That bothered us because if you look at his history, that usually every team that he played in the bowl game either shared a championship or came close or finished high in the ranking. So it wasn't like he was playing teams that weren't ranked high.
Opinions varied as to why Nebraska couldn't win the big one. But one fact that Cornhusker fans agreed on was that the program needed to address its need for speed.
Losing a lot of those Orange Bowl games, and especially to the Florida State and the Miami teams, had taught Nebraska that you really need speed, especially on defense, to compete.
When assistant coach Kevin Steele and defensive coordinator Charlie McBride convinced Coach Osborne that in order to beat the elite teams, it wasn't Miami's offense or Florida State's offense. It was their defense that was beating us in those bowl games. They played an attacking 4-3. We can do that. But coach, you've got to let us put athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So it was in the late stages of 1991 and 92 when they began to convert Nebraska away from a 52 defense to an attacking, blitzing, bump and run cover defense, and turn those linebackers into guys that can get to the quarterback.
So now we started moving guys that was normally corners to safeties, safeties to linebackers, linebackers to defensive ends, and we got extremely fast.
Once we made that adjustment to the 4-3, then we really went out and recruited the young men that can fit those positions.
And so a lot of those guys were 4-4, 4-5, 40 guys that would normally play in the secondary. So we got more speed on the field. We got our pass rushers rushing the passer all the time instead of half the time. And I think it made us a better defense.
Nebraska's 1993 season concluded on January 1st in the 1994 Orange Bowl. The Cornhuskers entered the game at 11-0 and ranked number 1 in the coaches' poll. Florida State was 11-1 and ranked number 1 in the AP poll. The winning coach, either Tom Osborne or Bobby Bowden, would claim his first national title. The Seminoles were a 17.5-point favorite.
We knew that we were the better team, and there was no way that anyone can tell me that on that night that Florida State was better than us.
We outplayed Florida State. You know, we had a punt and return call back that no one really figured out why. There was a fumble in the end zone that was counted as a touchdown.
Floyd follows the ball and Nebraska recovers. Was he in? No, they say touchdown. He'd broken the play.
The underdog Cornhuskers battled the Seminoles tooth and nail all night long. When Byron Bennett kicked a 27-yard field goal to give Nebraska a 16-15 advantage with 1:16 remaining, Husker Nation could taste a national title.
The things that stand on my mind about that Florida State championship game was, with a minute 16 seconds left, it's over. This game is in the bag. I personally was celebrating on the sideline.
You think that when you take over the lead with a minute and 16 seconds left that you can seal a deal, but for some reason that wasn't the case that night. And it was heartbreaking,
Behind Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward, Florida State drove into field goal range.
He's got it.
We still gave ourselves a chance after that. Well, we drove the ball down the field and had the opportunity to kick a field goal. And I've always told people that the last thing you want to do is put the fate of a game on the leg of a kicker, because anything can happen.
45 yards to steal it from Florida State and to give Cinderella, Nebraska a tremendous win and a national championship. And he hooked it left. Florida State wins.
It was a very devastating loss against a very good Florida State team that ended up winning the '93 national championship. But when we looked back on it, we also looked at that '93 Florida State team as a team that was literally who's who of the next year's NFL draft. We came 1 second and a missed field goal away from beating them. Just an incredibly talented team in Florida State. And we should have defeated them and won the national title in '93.
I think that led to an uncommon resolve in the offseason among our players going into the 1994 season. I wouldn't say that the 1994 team was the most talented team I'd ever coached, but they probably had the best chemistry and the most commitment and resolve.
We as a coaching staff didn't really have to motivate them to get them ready for the off-season program. They were ready to go the next day.
When we left the Orange Bowl, it was that minute and 16 seconds that we understood that we had done our job, but we didn't close the deal. And for that entire offseason, we would go out on the field at Memorial Stadium and they would have that minute and 16 seconds left on the scoreboard, and they also had underneath there a slogan that said unfinished business.
We started our off-season conditioning. At the end of every single session, we'd put a minute and 16 seconds on a clock. And we worked as hard as we physically could for a minute and 16 seconds longer. You learn a lot about your teammates because at the end of those workouts, you wouldn't think you could take another step. Well, it turns out you can.
That was our goal going into that '94 season, was to go on to finish our business.
There's a guy in the game that was playing across from Brendan. His name was Dusty Beavers. And poor Dusty, you know, Brendan's just working him over. And so he's covering Brendan, so I'm uncovered most of the game. So I'm coming down and Brendan will be blocking him. I'm just getting free shots and just taking this guy out, right? And so I come down and hit him, and his helmet must have flown 10 yards up in the air, right? So we have a timeout, and Dusty's on a knee there, and I'm yelling, Beavers, you had enough, Beavers? You want some more of this, Beavers? And I'm looking over, and here's a referee standing here, and he's laughing. And I look at Graham, and he's laughing. And I apologize to Dusty if he ever watches this.
Now 3rd and short. Frazier cuts it up. Tommy Frazier off to the races. 20, 10, touchdown.
Nebraska began the 1994 season ranked 4th in the preseason AP poll, behind number 1 Florida, number 2 Notre Dame, and number 3 Florida State. Despite their ranking, the Cornhuskers received the most first-place votes of any team in the poll. Nebraska's high-powered offense steamrolled its first 3 opponents by a combined margin of 122-37. The conductor of the explosive Cornhusker attack was quarterback Tommy Frazier.
Tommy, in my mind, and I tell a lot of people this, that he was one of the best college football players to not have won the Heisman. Not just from his numbers and his athletic talent, but he meant so much to the team in that huddle.
Hands down, the greatest competitor I ever played with. Tommy Frazier came here from Florida with the idea he was going to leave his mark on Nebraska football and on the college football game forever. And he did that.
Option. Frazier's got daylight. It's 6.
But I think Tommy came here with an attitude, with a chip on his shoulder that I think at times got misunderstood as arrogance.
You can throw him hard as you want. I'm not dropping any.
He was a guy that was very, very demanding on his players at practice. He challenged the offensive line. He challenged himself. He challenged the tight ends, receivers, backs in practice.
He demanded the very best from the people around him and wouldn't tolerate a mediocre effort or lack of concentration.
Quarterback is usually the face of every team. And so my job was to be that face. And yes, I had a swagger because I knew what we had. I knew how good we were.
When he first got here to Nebraska, I think he felt like a lot of people didn't think he was able to take Nebraska to the next level. And I think he wanted to prove to everybody how wrong they were.
He was perfect for that offense. He understood the G option and the sprint option. He understood the timing of it. He could read things extremely well. And so when you put a spectacular athlete in charge of an offense that's perfectly suited for him, this is what you get.
Despite starting the season 3-0, adversity hit the Huskers early when safety Mike Minter, whom many considered the quarterback of the black shirt defense, suffered a season-ending knee injury. 2 weeks later, the quarterback of the offense was bitten by the injury bug.
I called the athletic trainer and said, hey, something's not right here. I can't walk. So he said, they told me to meet him up here at the training room. So my roommate brought me up here. They looked at me and saw how my leg had swelled up. And that's when they called Dr. Deepak Gangahar. Said, hey, we think something's really wrong with Tommy's leg. We need you to look at it. Did an ultrasound on my leg. And that's when he realized I had a blood clot in my leg. He told me that my football career could be over with. You know, so that was crushing there. That was really the one time to where I was probably depressed. I didn't come around the team for about 5 weeks.
Once we learned that Tommy had this clotting problem and he was taking anticoagulants, it switched to more, you know, is Tommy going to be okay versus, you know, are we going to be okay until Tommy comes back.
Blood clots, what does that mean? So like they can put you on some medicine, you're going to be fine. You know, why does he have to have heat packs behind his knee? There was just a lot of uncertainty with what was going on. But the bottom line was we didn't have our Heisman Trophy candidate calling plays in the huddle.
Losing Tommy at that time, I think, solidified us even more as a team because we had to unite not only around Tommy and support him through his injury, but now we had to rely on everybody. It was a gut check for us guys up front with the pipeline. It was a gut check for Brooke Behringer.
With Tommy Frazier sidelined, backup quarterback Brooke Behringer stepped in to direct the attack.
Brooke came in and he had the type of confidence that we needed at the time to come in and calm us down and let us know that everything was okay. Tommy will be back, but I'm going to get this done until he gets back.
In his first start, Behringer rushed for 3 touchdowns to spark a 42-32 comeback victory over Wyoming. Behringer's high level of preparation was a testament to Coach Osborne's practice regimen.
Not only did the starters on offense and starters on defense get those repetitions, so did the second team. But more importantly, so did the third team. So for the philosophy that Coach Osborne had was, we're going to be as strong as our weakest link, right? And it didn't matter what part you played, what role you were, that you had to be prepared.
Like Frazier, Behringer proved he could be productive as the starting quarterback. He also proved that he was not immune to injury. Behringer suffered cracked ribs and a collapsed lung in back-to-back wins versus Wyoming and Oklahoma State. When the team traveled to Kansas State the following week, Osborne had to turn to redshirt sophomore walk-on quarterback Matt Turman.
This game can be summed up, I think, not in 2 words, but in 2 letters, QB.
I remember us in the car, me, Tommy, as we going to watch the game, and we said, man, can we believe that Matt Turman is about to start?
It was a rain day, and he ended up doing the warm-ups, and the first time we go out there and they have a ball, put a ball in his hand, and the ball falls out of his hand backwards. And I looked at one of the receivers coach, and I said, gave that eye look and started shaking my head like, okay, it's going to be interesting tonight.
Looking back on it now, Coach Osborne and Coach Gill were probably scared to death. We're taking our 3rd string quarterback, a walk-on who's $190, 5'10", And we're putting him in the game to continue our march towards a national title and to continue this undefeated season. And they have to be just scared out of their mind, but they never once showed it.
He was our Rudy. Or you have a walk-on who grew up in Nebraska. Dream was, all I want to do is play for Nebraska. If you do a movie about Rudy, then you can do a movie about Matt Turman.
He was a walk-on from the state of Nebraska, so there's that added pressure where half the town's probably going to be at the game, but the other half is going to have that TV tuned in watching you.
And he swings it to Lawrence Phillips.
Matt Turman was a cool customer. Again, he knew what we were going to do and how we were going to do things for that. Put him in a situation there just to, hey, manage the game, make the plays we need to make them. Again, trust your guys there and do what you need to do.
With Matt Turman starting under center, Nebraska defeated Kansas State 17-6, thanks to a dominating performance by the black shirt defense and a clutch 31-carry, 126-yard effort from another Heisman candidate in the Nebraska backfield.
Lawrence Phillips, the workhorse again. Big hole, big game.
He is the greatest talent this program has ever had at that position, pound for pound. He was that unique combination of speed, power, size, agility. He was a 1990s version of Gale Sayers, a 1990s version of Herschel Walker.
Lawrence was a cut above, and Lawrence was a cut above everybody else that was around in the country. And everyone noticed that when he came in '93 that Lawrence was very talented. He's probably the best running back I've seen with my own two eyes.
He was probably one of the best I've ever blocked for. We had Damon Benning on that team. We had Clinton Childs. We had just some fabulous running backs on that team. Lawrence Phillips was still head and shoulders, metaphorically and literally above all the other running backs on that team.
His off-the-field trials have been well documented, and it will unfortunately be a stain on the Nebraska football program for many, many years to come. But if you separate Lawrence's behavior off the field from his immeasurable skill on it, there is no doubt he's one of the very best ever here, and probably would have been considered one of the very best college backs of a generation.
Lawrence Phillips tied a school record by rushing for 100 yards or more in 11 straight games. His 1,722 yards rushing is still a record for sophomores at Nebraska. Phillips excelled by running behind an offensive line nicknamed the Nebraska Pipeline, a group whose immense talent was surpassed only by their confidence and swagger.
I remember specifically at points where our offensive line was telling the defensive line where we were going. And it's, you know, call it arrogance, whatever, but it was really the fact that we were on a mission.
I did that probably a couple hundred times that season, actually. I found it kind of fun where we'd run an ISO or something behind either Sty and I or the other way behind Rob and Joel. And then we'd line up again and say, hey, we're running the exact same play right here again. So you think you can stop it because we're coming? It's the exact same play. You should be able to stop it, right?
That shows you that ego, that cockiness, that swag. Only team that's gonna beat us is we beat ourselves.
Receiving will be Nebraska, 8-0 on the season. The game is on.
This game was huge. You know, that's all we talked about. It's all the fans talked about. It's all the students talked about in class. You know, are we gonna beat Colorado?
It was kind of the Clash of the Titans type thing. You know, we had one of our best teams. They had one of their best teams. Probably two of the most talented teams both schools ever had.
Other than the championship games, my favorite game I had an opportunity to play in. I think at one point in time that Colorado defense had 10 guys who started in the NFL.
From an emotional standpoint, we were more ready to play that game than we were even that Miami game for the national title. And I think it showed on the field.
Colorado entered the showdown with Nebraska, ranked number 2 in the AP poll. The third-ranked Cornhuskers desperately needed a win to keep their national championship hopes alive.
I think voters needed to feel convinced that Nebraska could beat a quality opponent. Without Tommy Frazier starting at quarterback, for them to have confidence to vote Nebraska number 1 or number 2, and that's exactly what happened.
Colorado had no chance. It was the 200th consecutive sellout at Memorial Stadium. It was a beautiful fall day. The national television audience, yes, the Buffaloes had great talent. They had spectacular talent on defense. But this was a game where Brooke Behringer came out and played his very best game. And the defense played a spectacularly good game.
Stewart on the option. Down he goes. Number 99, Terry Corneely. Corneely blowing up the middle.
That was clutch. I mean, we knew we had to play big in that game. And Brooke knew he had to play big. There was a lot of question marks going in on Brooke Behringer. Could he do it against a real good opponent? And he played flawless.
Winning the game wasn't going to be enough. We had to make a statement. And so we knew that. The fans knew that. The media knew that. And so Brooke did what he'd always been doing. He always had a great completion percentage. He always ran the ball well. He always made incredibly good decisions. It's just he got out there and did it on that day, and he did it against one of the best defenses in the country that season.
Before the Colorado game, Bill McCartney, the Colorado coach, said he wasn't sure whether Brooke Behringer could handle the pressure of a game like that. That's famous last words, probably. Yeah, he handled it pretty well.
Nebraska ambushed Colorado, scoring the game's first 24 points, defeating the Buffaloes 24-7.
Phillips on the last play of the game. And the 75th edition of Oklahoma against Nebraska is in the books, folks. The final score, 13-3.
Let's make sure that we do whatever it takes next month to get the thing done. Lots of programs go 20, 30 years and never get to this point. So let's finish it off. You know, whatever they give us, we'll take it. Let's make it work, okay? Congratulations, did a great job.
We still don't know about Frazier as the season comes to a close. They go down to Oklahoma and beat, an Oklahoma team, finish the regular season undefeated, and Brooke Behringer's still the quarterback. He's the guy. And so now we have 5 weeks before the Orange Bowl game, and it's still not clear whether Tommy Frazier is going to be back to play in the Orange Bowl. And if Nebraska's going to be the national champion, they're going to have to do it against a great Miami team, maybe without Tommy Frazier.
We had fallen short in 92 in Miami. We've fallen short in 93 in Miami. What better way to go out on top? What better way to start a legacy of Nebraska football all over again with national championships? It's just like any type of other adversity. You face adversity head on and see what the outcome is going to be. We're going to find out who's going to have the stronger will.
In a season filled with hurdles, the final one for the Cornhuskers would prove to be the most challenging. A New Year's Day game versus Miami in the Orange Bowl, against the program that had spoiled Nebraska's title hopes several times previously. Before Tom Osborne could figure out how to conquer the Canes, he first had to decide on who would be his starting quarterback. Brooke Behringer, 7-0 as a starter, or Tommy Frazier?
You look at it and say, well, that was great. Nebraska had 2 quality quarterbacks, and Brooke Behringer and Tommy Frazier. But in the process, it can be a divisive thing, because I'm sure there were people on the team, players, who thought, hey, Brooke ought to be the guy. And, there were players on the team, obviously, that think Tommy ought to be the guy. So those kinds of things can divide a team as well as bring it together in the situation that we saw.
At the end of the day, it wasn't our decision. So we could have went out there and politic for the job, but Coach Osborne and the staff were the ones who's gonna make the final decision. So there was no need for that. Because at the end of the day, it was about what was gonna be the best for this team.
That whole off time before the bowl game, every media person tried to get them to say a negative thing about one another. I should be starting, or I shouldn't be starting. I mean, I sat and listened to interviews, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I truly believe if we would have walked up to either Tommy or Brooke and said, our best chance is to win with you, the other one said, then I won't play if you really think the best chance to win because I just want to win. I think they really would have just stepped aside.
Brooke and I were roommates, and there were numerous times where we would sit and talk. about his situation when he was backing up Tommy Frazier. And there were times where he wasn't happy because he felt he had the talent to play, and he felt he may never get that opportunity. I remember specifically one time in our driveway where he was given serious consideration to transferring. But we talked about it, and I remember specifically encouraging him to say, man, you just never know. You never know. I'm just thankful that he elected to stay and ultimately accomplish what he was able to accomplish.
We always had a major scrimmage, usually here in Lincoln, before we went to the bowl game. And again, Tommy showed his old form and played very well. And we felt that his ability would be the best matchup for Miami's defense. They had a very fine defense. But we also resolved that we would play both of them pretty much interchangeably.
Tommy Frazier hasn't played since September 24th. Blood clots in his right leg. He's received medical clearance. Brooke Berringer, as you heard John Dockery say, he will play, may very well play in the first quarter. 7-0.
The mystery is solved. Tommy Frazier is going to play. He's going back to South Florida, where he's from. He's going to play in the Orange Bowl, and it's almost like a Willis Reed situation. You know, we're going to rally around, and this is going to carry Nebraska, lift the spirits.
Frazier lofts it downfield. Muhammad double covered. Interception made by Carlos Jones of Miami.
And it's 10-0 before you score. Tommy's back, yeah, but when was the last time he stepped on the field? I mean, is there going to be any rust at all? Do you think about that sort of thing? He's not going to be the same guy that he was the last time he stepped on the field.
Quick drop. Costa swings it complete. Jones to the 15. Jones for the touchdown.
I've got to think that the Nebraska fans in attendance there just had to sulk when it looked like this was starting out to be another Nebraska Orange Bowl collapse type of a game.
I'm sure a lot of people were like, here we go again. I mean, we hadn't earned the trust to think that we should win those games. I mean, we just lost how many bowl games in Miami. I think Miami had lost one out of like their last 60 games at home. People forget when they write the history books that we played all these teams at home most of the time on their own field for the bowl game. It's a little different. I'd like this. We always say, well, why don't you come up here in January and play us up here and see how it goes.
Nebraska trailed 10-0 just minutes into the game. Coach Osborne refused to panic, instead sticking to his game plan and inserting Brooke Berringer to relieve Tommy Frazier. And just as he did during the regular season, Berringer provided a spark.
Play action. Berringer rolls, flips, caught, touchdown, Gilman.
I think Berringer brought that sense of calm to Nebraska. They get back in the game, it's close at halftime, and I'm thinking, are they going to lose an 8th straight bowl game? It would have been the most crushing defeat for Nebraska in its stretch of bowl losses.
'94 Colorado game. Before the game, I made up a story, told it just to the starting offensive lineman, that Shannon Clavel, Colorado's starting and star defensive tackle, got off the charter flight carrying a pipe cutter to signify that they were going to cut through the Nebraska pipeline, the nickname our offensive line had. And I told that to the offensive line. A lot of the guys got awfully fired up about it. Best part of it, though, I always thought was walking through the locker room after the game. The press interviews are wrapping up, and I still heard 2 or 3 offensive linemen on the team talking about how, with their defensive line carrying a pipe cutter off of the plane, that was something that really served to motivate them to go out and really just put this absolutely dominating performance on Colorado that day. But it was a completely made-up story.
One of the things that was just amazing about Coach Osborne was he had this uncanny ability to predict.
I think we're going to wear them out. Matter of fact, I know we are.
One time we were playing Colorado, and he said we'll score on the first play because he had designed this new option and a new way to block it. And first play, we pitch it, and Amon Green goes down and scores, you know. And everybody's just like looking at each other like, how does he know this stuff?
We just keep hammering them. In the fourth quarter, we'll be able to do what we want to do.
Unbelievable. I've told this story a million times, but he literally called it almost minute by minute of the second half with his same I mean, he's the only guy in the world that I know that cannot raise his voice 1 octave, not scream, nothing, and make a whole room go bonkers.
You need a lot of pressure on that quarterback. You can see when he's under pressure, he does not do well.
It was exactly like Coach Osborne called it. It was like he wrote a script. I mean, he literally read a script to us, and it's exactly how the game happened before the game was played.
It's going to happen, and it'll happen late in the ball game probably. But if we keep going, we're going to be all right.
We compare him sometimes to Yoda because it was like one great big Jedi mind trick. Whatever he needed you to believe, he could get you to believe, and he could talk you through it. You could visualize, he could make his words come to life. And so to see his thought process and his sentiment validated, we had no idea at the half that what he said was going to exactly come to fruition, but you believed it. So then once the world got to see it and you hear those halftime clips and then you see what happens, it's almost like, see, we told you.
Despite Osborne's optimism, the hole for Nebraska deepened as the second half began.
Costa's pass to a wide open Harris. Jonathan Harris cuts back. He's to the 15, to the outside. Harris racing for the end zone. Touchdown.
Of all the second half prophecies Coach Osborne spoke, the one that changed momentum came when one of the team's most fiery competitors heeded his coach's warning and kept his calm.
Fellas, now one last thing. Now listen to me. I'll promise you this. If you guys will get your hands down, they're going to get a critical penalty at a time that's going to kill them.
He tells the players that there's going to be an incident in the half and don't respond. Keep your composure. And if you do that, we can be successful. And what happens? There's an incident in which if you lined up all the Huskers going into the game and say, okay, which guy is least likely to take that advice and not respond if he gets pushed around? Christian Peter would probably be the guy that you'd say, he'll retaliate.
If you got in a fight in practice, if Coach Osborne was around, you immediately, no questions asked, didn't matter whose fault it was, who started it, you ran stadium stairs until he told you to quit running stadium stairs. And I can tell you that season that Christian Peter ran a lot of stadium stairs.
Looking for the defense to make a stop here. Stewart on the delayed handoff. Flag, a late one coming in. Terwilliger and Coleman on the tackle for Nebraska.
Flags are down on the flag.
And another late flag.
When it all came down to it, you know, Christian Peter, a guy who was maybe known to be the person who would end up getting the flag, actually was the guy who the penalty was committed against.
To see Christian harness his emotions to do the right thing for the betterment of others around him in the heat of the moment, I think typifies two things. Number one, the influence of our coaching staff and the ability to have their thought process kind of trickle down to the players. And number two, the belief that we as players had and our staff that what they say will work.
As the game wore on, the big team from the Plains had plenty of gas left in its tank, just as Osborne predicted. As for the speedy athletic team from the South, that was a different story.
I just remember the first half, Warren Sapp is playing defensive tackle, and we run a toss sweep to Lawrence, and it gets strung out. Warren Sapp tackles Lawrence 2/3 across the field on our sideline for no yards. And I just remember thinking to myself, how did that happen? You know, nobody does that to Lawrence Phillips. And when the middle of third quarter rolls around, Warren Sapp isn't running from one hash to the sideline anymore. He's barely getting from one hash to the other. He's so tired from the pounding that our O-line has put on him. He doesn't have it anymore, and our team can see that.
And it wasn't that they weren't playing hard or didn't want to win as bad as we did. You could just tell they were physically getting tired, and so that adds to your confidence when you see the other team being that tired.
This is their home field, this is their home climate, and we were out working these guys.
With the Hurricanes' defense showing signs of fatigue, the Nebraska ground game was poised to strike. They needed just 2 plays.
Lawrence Phillips breaking tackles to the 20 with a cutback to the 15-yard line. Schlesinger. Touchdown.
trailing by 2 following the Corey Schlesinger touchdown. And with a national championship in sight, Nebraska readied for a 2-point conversion. Unlike 1984, this time to tie the score.
Frazier will throw. It's good. 2-point conversion. Eric Alford made the catch.
With the score tied at 17, Miami went 3 and out on its next possession. Then the MVP of the 94 Orange Bowl made his mark on the 95 game.
Option. Frazier keeps. Cuts up. He's got the first down. He's got more than that. He's spun down at the 28-yard line.
We were out on the 14-yard line, and we ran a play that we did not run all season. We installed it for this game only, and every time we ran this play, I was running. I was going 15, 20 yards every single time, and it was interesting when he called that play in the huddle. I just felt and I knew I'm going to get in the end zone.
Schlesinger has another touchdown.
It's an illusion. The option offense is an illusion. You don't see it coming because we run it so much to the outside. Either one of our quarterbacks will keep it or pitch it to one of us running backs, but you never saw the fullback coming. If you look at that football game over and over again, how many times did we actually run the fullback up the gut?
Nursing a 24-17 lead, Nebraska's defense took the field, committed to not repeat the result of a year ago.
Costa got away and then is taken down.
This time, the Cornhuskers would finish in style.
Costa deep downfield, up for grabs, intercepted.
There have been so many frustrations. Starting with the Orange Bowl after the 78 season when you had to play a rematch against Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. I mean, it was just like one frustration after another. Clemson ends up getting a national championship at your expense. The one after the 83 season, the 84 Orange Bowl, where Tom goes for 2 and you come up short. So it's appropriate that the first national championship comes in the Orange Bowl, and I think that you have to battle back, that you're behind, and you have to come back, and in the fourth quarter, when Nebraska prides itself on being the most physical team and the best conditioned team, that's when you win it.
The first thing was that we finally got that stigma off Coach Osborne, that he couldn't win the big one. I think we were more excited for him than we were ourselves.
We ought to do this more often, don't you think? I'd like to thank you very much. I know you've been here a long time, and it's certainly taken a lot of patience on your part. About 22 years of it, I guess. But
I just got a couple things to say. On behalf of the entire team, I'd like to thank Coach Osborne, the best football coach in the country.
Feels good, doesn't it, man? People wonder why I left the state of Texas to come play football here, and look what we got now, national championship.
To be honest, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because of the previous 2 years, 92 and 93. It wasn't enough. We wanted more. So we took a little bit of time off. We knew that we were national champions. After it sank in, we went right back to work because we knew what that feeling felt like, and we wanted it again with my senior class in 95.
We were going to be seniors that next year, and we didn't want to go out losers. You know, we saw how great it was for that senior class to go out on the top of the world, and we said to ourselves that this is just the start, and we're going to finish this right our senior year because we don't get a year after this.
In 1995, those seniors remained perfect, winning 12 games and repeating as undefeated national champions with a 62-24 victory over Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. For the third straight year, Tommy Frazier was named MVP in a bowl game. And Brooke Behringer, arguably the hero of the 94 season, was his backup. On April 18, 1996, Brooke Berringer was tragically killed when the small plane he was piloting crashed shortly after takeoff in Raymond, Nebraska. He was 22 years old.
I think his death probably had more impact on our football team than any one event that I can remember, because everybody respected him, they admired him. I think a lot of people, when they're young, they think they're bulletproof. They think they're going to live forever. And a lot of our players realize that, you know, if a guy like Brooke could be taken from us that quickly, that maybe you ought to think a little bit about what your life's all about, what's really important in the long term.
The news of him dying in that plane crash was, God, it was just like a stab in the heart. Losing one of your best friends, after everything we went through, and collectively winning another championship the next year, it was a tremendous tragedy. But I'm just very thankful to have known Brooke, and I'm going to do everything I can to continue his legacy. Matter of fact, my little daughter's middle name is Brooke after him.
What would happen? What would we see from Brooke 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Would he have a great NFL career? And everybody was sure that he would, because he was a perfect pro-style quarterback. Would he come back and, you know, open a business in Nebraska? Or would he fulfill his dream of becoming an airline pilot? It was lost promise.
He's had a profound effect on the state of Nebraska and the fans that follow Husker football. For a guy that had one season as a starter, for him to be held in such high regard after that one season is a testament to what everyone saw in his character. And then the next year, he lost his starting job to Tommy, because Tommy was back. And for him to hold his head high and play behind Tommy all year and not complain one bit, I think to his teammates and to the state of Nebraska, it showed everyone what his character was all about, and it made everyone feel good about him as a football player, but more importantly as a person.
You will never see at any other university to where the backup quarterback is just as big in a given year as a starter quarterback. And the reason why, because of the way he played, the things he did in the community, the type of teammate he was, to where he was always encouraging. We knew that we had each other's back.
I think a lot of it was that Nebraska saw in Brooke Berringer a lot of what they'd like to see in themselves. He was kind of a hard-working Midwestern guy, you know, just do the right thing and step up when the opportunity comes, but don't complain, just work hard. And I think that's the way Nebraska people see themselves that way. And so I think some of it was Brooke Berringer represented what they felt was the best part of being in the Midwest.
It reminds me of a line from Shakespeare. It applies, I think, to what most Nebraskans thought, and that is, you know, death lies upon him like a frost upon the prettiest flower in the field. He had a special way with Nebraskans, and I think he had a very special way with Coach Osborne and everybody on the football team.
Kevin Steele was the guy who recruited me, and they were going through their run station, and this one linebacker, Aaron Penley, kept making the same mistake over and over. So he told him, "Say, you make that mistake again, you're gonna run the stadium step." And so he made the mistake again. He said, "You're gonna run the stadium steps until I get tired." So 45 minutes later, someone walked over and said, "You might want to call Aaron, tell him to come on down and practice." He's like, "I forgot about it." So, I mean, it was, and people just in the film were just laughing at him because you just saw him up and down, up and down.